A nigga might be from a third world country, but a nigga got standards.
What's good? This is your boy Internal Status. Vedic Ghost. Oh God, I'm having a rough day. All right, this is your boy Vedic Ghost. Um, this video is going to be about single mothers, daughters of single mothers. Um, so the thing about it is, this is going to be a continuation of the Sons of Single Mothers podcast, because it's basically a continuation, because it's all about the children of single mothers, basically. So this is going to be a continuation of that. So at the end of the day, it's going to be all about the daughters of single mothers. We're going to talk more on the daughter side. We're going to touch on some of the son side, and something I've noticed about the single mothers, and when it comes to the children of single mothers, is we typically don't really talk about the bad that comes out of what single mothers do. Sadly, we always talk about the good, or we always talk about crap that has nothing to do with the fact that she's messing up as a mother for all intents and purposes, or we don't talk about the fallouts of all this stuff because we sweep it under the rug, and we just typically just blame men, because typically we live in a society where we just blame men for everything and not all the things for all intents and purposes. Sad part about that is, when it comes down to it, there's only one person to really blame. Like I always say, anytime somebody's in a bad situation, or somebody made a bad choice, it's a series of bad decisions that put you in the situation that you're in at the end of the day. So when it comes down to it, you typically have a problem with how people. And the sad part about that, women have a problem with being criticized. At the end of the day, is the best way to put it. So when you criticize a woman, you pretty much murdered her for all intents and purposes, or committed a crime against her at the end of the day. The sad part about that is, like I said, when it comes down to it, when you're dealing with single mothers and the children of single mothers, this is where the black pill typically gets it wrong. This is where the black pill typically starts. You know, this is where the black pill teaching actually fucks up and actually veers off into crazy la la land, basically. Because at the end of the day, this stuff isn't science. This stuff is social science. It's not genetic science, basically. Because at the end of the day, it's what you see in your household, or see growing up, or see in your environment, that you learn and you actually do. Because you can't sit up here and tell me that if a child grows up in a single mother household, he mimics the same thing that his mom does. It's genetics. It's not genetics. He learned it from his mother. Therefore, he makes the faces of his mother. Therefore, he has the same mannerisms as his mother. The same thing goes for. Yeah, the same thing goes for. The same thing goes for any and all people who get themselves in a situation. Because, like I said, this is nothing more than a series of bad decisions when it comes down to it. But when it comes to the black pill, they typically get this wrong because they know nothing. It's like they know nothing about social science, and if they do, they basically sweep it under the rug so they can make their narrative fit. And what I'm talking about is the daughters of single mothers, because at the end of the day, matter of fact, I was telling the story about a daughter yesterday in the Sons of Single Mothers video. What's up, heartbroken kid? The sad part about that is, at the end of the day, I went in this room. Basically, I'll restart the story again. I went in this room, and in this room was a mother, a mother of the baby, the mother of that daughter, and the grandmother in the room. Now, the funny thing about that is, the daughter was 15 and she was pregnant. She had a baby. She just delivered her baby at 15. The mother was 30 and the grandmother was 45. Where do you think they learned that from? Obviously, each other. Obviously, the grandmother had her daughter when she was like 15. Then the mother had her daughter when she was 15, and now this current generation is having her daughter when she's 15. So the sad part about that is, I wouldn't be shocked if the baby grows up to be 15 and ends up pregnant, and the mother ends up being 30, and the grandmother of that baby ends up being 30, 45, and grandma ends up being 60. It's sad, but it's basically all how it works, basically. Because if you can't sit up here, if you can't learn from your mistakes and you can't break the cycle, you're going to repeat the cycle. You're doomed to always repeat the same cycle. And the sad part about that is these same women grow up dating the same men, the same style of men that their mom dated. It's not genetics. It's basically what they were told. They can have anything they want, but they basically go after the same men that the women are told. Because the sad part about this is what the black pill leaves out. And you're right, it is cope. It's all cope. Um, it's all cope because you can't get what you want, basically, or it's all cope because you were sold this dream and you believed it so hard that you got to cope now. And the sad part about that is, and the sad part about that is, when it comes down to it, women typically do what's familiar to them. They don't do what's happening in pop culture. They do what's familiar to them. So whatever their mother did, they're going to do. Whatever when any female in their family did, that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to mimic, and that's basically the type of style of dating that they're going to have. So if a woman grows up in a household with her mother basically parading men in and out of her room, you best believe when she gets older, she's going to parade men in and out of her room. At the end of the day, if a woman if her if a woman if a little girl grows up in a household where her mom is has a high body count, she's going to have a high body count. 9 times out of 10, her body count's going to start when she's even younger than her mother. It is what it is. It's the nature of the beast, and this is how social science seeps into everything. Because at the end of the day, you can't sit up here and tell me that feminism is genetics. You can't honestly sit up here and tell me feminism is genetics when it's not genetics. It's basically a social construct that makes it so that women believe all this stuff that they're not. At the end of the day, the same thing goes for black pill. You're basically coping with the fact that you can't get something, or you're not adequate enough, or you're not that person's type, so therefore you sulk like a little girl. Typically how it works. The sad part about that is, when it comes down to it, women love dreams, and women like to believe in dreams and believe that against the odds they can they can beat something or get something at the end of the day, when in fact that's not how it really works. It works in Hollywood movies. It may work every once in a blue moon, but it doesn't work like that in real life, sadly. The sad part about that is, even women in these types of relationships where they're in a relationship with an abusive guy, they believe that they can change that person from not being abusive. And the sad part about this, you can't change somebody from not being abusive. If that person's abusive, it's never going to change. They're never going to seek the help that they get. It's basically like my one friend who suffered childhood trauma, and she won't get the help to actually sort it out. She just holds on to it until she wonders why she can't be in a relationship or can't have a successful relationship, or always ends up in a relationship with men who want to always be territorial, or always want to tell her what to do, basically. And the sad part about that is, that's the type of relationship you're going to be in until you deal with your problem. But she doesn't want to see that. And the sad part about that is, if you as a woman, if you grow up in a situation where you watch your mom struggle, you're going to grow up and struggle. It's basically like the generation of welfare queens in the black community. Your mom was a welfare queen. Now you're a welfare queen. Your daughter's going to be a welfare queen, and so on and so on and forth on and forth on. It's typically how it works. So this is something that if the daughter of a mother sees what is actually going on in the house, she's going to mimic that growing up. She's going to repeat those behaviors. She's going to repeat those habits that her mother had at the end of the day. If her mom was a drug addict, she's probably going to repeat that. If her mom was teen pregnant, she's definitely going to repeat that. If so on and so on and forth on the style of men that her mom dates, she's definitely going to repeat that too. So it's one of those things where it's like, at the end of the day, it's basically like it's basically the sons. It's like the sons of single mothers. Only thing different is it's just daughters, basically. And this is where the repercussions and consequences happen. And this is what you literally see growing up today with the feminism and where have all the good men gone, when in fact these very same women that grew up in that type of household see their brothers and see how their brothers grew up, but totally slips their mind how their brothers are being raised, and they think the rest of the world's not being raised the same way. When in fact, it's what like I think it's what like 60%, 60 to 80% of the population is what raised by single mothers now in what the Western world I think it is, and you expect a man to be a man being raised by a single mother. Like your mom has no male qualities. How's she going to raise a man to be a man if she has no male qualities? All she's going to raise is she's going to raise either a sensitive boy, a sensitive little boy. She's going to say she's going to raise her son to be a sensitive little boy as an adult, basically, or she's going to raise her son to be a fuck up, basically, or she's going to raise her son. She's going to coddle her son so much that he's going to believe he can't do anything wrong and everything he's doing is right, basically, and and you can't tell them nothing, basically. And the sad part about that, you see these with these children now growing up, and the women expect, despite the fact that they watched their brother grow up just like them, they expect the men to be men when in fact they were never raised or set up properly to be men. And this is the women that you see in this cycle now growing up. This is the women that you see in the cycle growing up where they talk about where have all the good men gone? Where have all the intellectually, where have all the that financially successful, or what was the one term that they used the one time? Where's the economically attractive men at? Where's the all these terms where men are trash, stuff like that. Well, you didn't break the cycle, and you watched your brothers grow up like this, so you can't expect men to be all this and more when in fact you're not all this and more, and you grew up in the same household as your brothers, and your brothers ain't shit, basically. And at the end of the day, that's all it really is. It's like a bunch of women projecting what they grew up and seen, and now they believe that because they're in a real world, that the real world should change like it was when they were in their household, when they were telling they were beautiful and they can do no wrong and they all win prizes and they're cute and all this stuff, when in fact they're not. They're not in the least bit. And the sad part about that is this is society that they're growing up in and where they believe this stuff. Even the boys nowadays are growing up like this, sadly. But the daughters are worse for the fact that they totally, out of sight, out of mind, or they totally forgot about the fact that they literally grew up in a single mother household and they watched their brothers struggle, and now their brothers ain't shit, basically, but they want to say, where have all the good men gone? Or they'll say, my favorite is, oh, all men are trash, but my brothers and my dad and all these people, or they'll say, my brothers are great, though. My brothers are great men, though. And the sad part about that, your brother's a wuss. Your brother's a fucking wuss, sadly. And the sad part about that is nobody wants to admit to the fact that their mom fucked up in raising them, but they want to praise their mom, but they don't want to admit the fact that they kind of sort of messed up, or they made a lot of missteps that got them to the situation they're in. Because you can't sit up here and tell me your mom was successful at raising you, but you never finished school, you're a drug addict, you're in jail, you're an alcoholic, you're pregnant as a teenager, and you didn't finish any college curriculum or anything, basically, but your mom did a successful job of raising you. In what world is that successful job? I can't see myself as a when I was a single father. I can't see myself raising my children and then finding out later that one of them is like stripping at a club. I wish my daughter would, but I didn't raise my daughter like that, so therefore I would never have to worry about anything like that. Or my daughter, I know for sure that none of my daughters are going to have an OnlyFans account for all intents and purposes. And it is what it is because I raised my daughters properly. And the sad part about that is nobody knows how to raise children. Everybody wants to read about their children instead of actually raise their children. Or everybody wants to blame everybody else for the shortcomings on their children, but they don't want to take responsibility for raising their children or the things that they did wrong in a relationship. I mean, not the relationship. The things that they did wrong in raising their children. They don't want to take responsibility for that. They want to blame everybody else for their shortcomings and mishaps in raising their children, sadly. And the sad part about that is that's not how this works. I mean, in the Western world, that's how it works because you can blame everybody else for your children being messed up. You can blame it on music. You can blame it on movies. You can blame it on video games. You can blame it on the next door neighbor, the school. And you don't have to take responsibility for how you raise your children at all. This is the cold hard truth behind females. Because this is where I'm going with this whole entire thing because you can pass all this blame off on other things. Little girls grow up believing that it's not their fault either, so they blame all these other things except for the mistakes that they're actually making. Because in a Western world, women don't have to take responsibility for their actions. Women don't have to take any liability, any fault, anything when they do something wrong. It's somebody else's fault, or it's that man's fault, or it's the fact that they didn't have a father around when they were a kid, but now they're adults, and now they still want to use that same argument. Sadly, that's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is because they grew up seeing this, they grew up believing this. When they grow up believing this, they grow up enacting this in their whole entire life. And the sad part about that is they get very mad, they get very triggered when stuff don't go their way, and they start blaming men. And then they got a bunch of simps that'll come to the rescue and say, "Well, you can't treat a queen like that." One's like, "Well, she's not being a queen, so therefore, I'll treat her like a queen when she acts like a queen." And the sad part about that is all these women running around here raised by single mothers, they want to be a queen, but they're a princess, or they want to be a queen, but they're a brat, and they have no queen. They have no queen qualities. They have no queen mentality, and they have no queen reasoning. But they want to be a queen, acting like a big child. You can't be a queen and act like a big child. If you're going to be a queen, you got to be regal. You got to act as such. You got to work the part. You can't be up here talking about queen this when in fact you're not a queen. The sad part about that is, it's funny how it's funny how it's funny how a certain group of people that refer to themselves as queens are the drag queen community acts more like queens than women. That's like the funniest thing I've ever seen. Like they act more like queens. I mean, granted they're not queens, but they act more like queens and they act more like they got sense than actual women. Like let that sink in for a second. We got a bunch of men dressing up like women, acting more like women than women. That's the society that we live in. Roles are reversed. Men aren't men anymore. Men are women, and women are acting like men, and they wonder why they can't hold down a job. I mean, they can't. They wonder why they can't hold down a man, or hold down a job, or hold down any damn thing, or keep a man, and they blame the man that left them, when in fact they should be blaming themselves or looking at themselves to possibly make changes within themselves to be a better human being. Or they'll say stuff like, "Well, he needs to accept me for me." Well, nobody has to accept you for anything. And if you're not willing to accept a man for doing the same damn thing, you really don't have a room to talk, or you don't have a leg to stand on in this argument, sadly. It is what it is. Because if you're not willing to accept a man, you can't expect a man to accept a man. You can't expect a man to accept you acting the way you are if you're not willing to accept a man for anything, basically. Especially if you have a laundry list of things that you want a man to be. You can't expect a man not to have any of those things on that laundry list for your ass. And if you're not willing to practice any of the stuff on your list, then you don't deserve that list. That's just it. Because the sad part about that is women that were raised by single mothers grow up with this entitlement complex, out of this world entitlement complex. Don't get me wrong, women already have an entitlement complex, but women raised by single mothers have this serious entitlement complex. They believe they deserve everything and more, and everything under the sun, and what you got, what they got, what everybody else got, and they believe that, it should be provided for them without them doing any or little work. Sad part about that is women already have this entitlement, but women, girls that are raised by single mothers have this even bigger entitlement when it comes to it, sadly. A good example is pop culture now, where you got a bunch of women saying that, you know, I don't need to bring nothing to the table because I am the table, or I don't need to bring nothing to the table because I'm a woman. Or what do you bring to the table? Vagina, or the fact that they look good, or stuff like that. And it's like, you don't even have to try anymore. You don't even have to try to be women anymore. Because the sad part about that, the reason why women are so entitled and so empowered is because of simps. Simps and cucks. If it wasn't for simps and cucks, women would fly right, sadly. I would say round up every single simp and cuck and throw them off a cliff. That's just me, though. And that's exactly how I feel about it. And it's sad, but it's so true. Like, our world would be a lot better if it wasn't for simps and cucks at the end of the day. Women would fly much better because they would be kept in check without simps and cucks. Because you can't really do stuff and have people co-sign on it if there's no simps and cucks to do it. Now, women would co-sign on other women, but the sad part about that, if there's no simps and cucks, typically women would try to go with the men life for all intents and purposes. The only reason why women can go do this shit so brash and rash is because of simps and cucks. The sad part about that is typically, if you walk in a room, if a bunch of men walk in a room, we'll just say 13 men that are manly men, and 50 cucks are in the room with several women doing stupid shit, out of this world stupid shit. Now, the sad part about that is because these women have these 50 cucks, they're able to manipulate the manly men into letting them do whatever the fuck they want, basically, unless all 13 manly men whoop the fuck out of all the cucks. Now, if the roles were reversed and there was like only a couple simps and the rest were cucks, I mean, the rest were manly men, the sad part about that, those same women, that behavior would change for the fact that the masculine men outnumber the simps. And the masculine men basically have the last word. And the sad part about that is women like to appease men no matter what, because women are agreeable. But we live in a world where the simps outnumber the masculine men, so they always get reassurance and co-signed by simps and cucks basically on a regular basis. And so if one masculine man comes in and says, that's not ladylike, get the fuck out of my face, he's going to be shamed by all the cucks and simps and all the women, because he shouldn't think like that, because all these cucks and simps think like this, and so he should think like this, so he should be a cuck and simp when in fact he's not a cuck and a simp. And the sad part about that is this is how most men get caught up. Men think they can just go in with just one manly man and take on, the whole entire brood of women. The sad part about that is you really got to teach the men not to be cucks and simps first before you attempt to actually remotely change any of this shit in the first damn place. You're going to have to convert a majority of manly men. I mean, you're going to have to convert a majority of these cucks and simps into masculine men so you can remotely have the numbers to actually make women do what you want. That's one way to get it. That's the one way to get it done. Another way to get that's like a lot of fucking work for no reason, because that's way too many cuck men and way too many simp ass men to be trying to control and, get under one umbrella, basically. The other way to do it is basically just change the laws. Get rid of the laws, change the laws, rip out some laws, rewrite some laws, basically, to change a lot of this shit so we can make it work better and make it more fair and balanced, or make it so that, okay, yeah, no, this is out of hand, this fucked up, it's not going to work. Or our economy collapsed, basically, because of this shit. And that's the only way you can possibly do it, because the sad part about that, what a lot of these feminists don't realize is, just because you're not having kids, you're not really saving the world. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't need you. The world doesn't need you at all. The world's been through a lot of shit that's worse than you, a lot more shit that would ever be worse than you, and you're nothing more than a moment in time to this world, to the earth, and it's only a matter of time before it shakes you off and starts all over again fresh. That's basically how the earth works. Anytime it has a species or something that's wrong on it, it basically just shakes you off like a dog shaking off fleas, and it starts all over again. Humans are only like a blip in time, so the world doesn't need you to protect it. What the world needs you to do is follow science and follow Mother Nature is what it needs you to do. It don't need you to do all this extra shit that you think is going to be right for the world, because the world really doesn't need you. If it wanted to, it can make everybody disappear with an asteroid in a heartbeat. If it wanted to, it can make everybody disappear by inverting the poles, the polarity of the poles if it wanted to. If it wanted to, it can pretty much, decide to drift closer to the sun and burn everybody alive, basically. The earth really doesn't need you to protect it, when in fact it's protecting itself for many, many billions of trillions of years. So you're not even needed. You just like to feel like you're needed because you're inadequate in your own life. That's the sad part about women, especially women that were raised by single mothers, or women that were raised by mothers that were overbearing and overpowered their men in their lives, sadly. What's up, the King Lion? The sad part about that is when you're raised by women like this, you basically think, instead of actually focusing on yourself, you like focusing on shit that has nothing to do with you, because now the focus is not on you, it's on other things, because you're too weak to deal with your own problems. And this is basically the society of women that we grew up, that we're raising now, that are reading off at the mouth and doing all this craziness, because they don't have the courage to fix themselves. They want to fix everything else in the world, but they don't want to fix themselves, because they don't believe that they got anything wrong, or they don't believe they have to. And the sad part about this, all that shit that you're not fixing within yourself just snowballs into a bigger snowball, and eventually it crushes you, and you realize now you actually got to start fixing shit, or now you got to lay there and want to kill yourself, basically. And the sad part about that is there's not too many women who actually commit suicide or want to commit suicide, but at the end of the day, there are women that get driven to that point, and it actually does happen. Not as much as men, but the sad part about that is women typically get more help. Women typically get more help than men do in this department to save them from actually committing suicide. When in fact, men get very little to no help in this department because fuck men. That's typically how the society works. And the sad part about that is, as a woman, you have one or two options: either you deal with your problems, or you get crushed by your problems and you be an emotional wreck, and you end up emotional wreck throughout all your relationships, and you wonder why you're driving men away, as you blame them for not being man enough to deal with your problems, when in fact it's you that have to deal with your problems at the end of the day. It's not the man's job to deal with your problems. It's your job as a human being and a grown-ass adult to deal with your own damn problems. Let it be emotional, let it be mental, let it be physical. You got to deal with your problems. If you're not woman enough to deal with your problems, you're not woman enough to be in a relationship. If you're not woman enough to deal with your problems or fix them, you're not woman enough to be a mother at all. And that's typically how I feel when it comes to women. If you're not big enough, or you don't got your big girl panties on to deal with your everyday problems or your life, basically, you don't deserve to be a mother. Nor do you deserve to be in a relationship. You have to be able to deal with your stuff. It's basically like what Jordan Peterson says about cleaning out your closet, cleaning your room first before you go and deal with the world. The sad part about that is the world's always going to be there. Whether you like it or not, no matter how much you read about it, it's going to die and our children are going to be living. Yeah, no, the world's always going to be there. Trust me. The world's always going to be there. The problem is you not wanting to fix yourself. And now you're projecting that out into worldly problems that you have no control over even happening. And you want to blame certain countries for polluting the world when in fact you got, another country over there who's literally dropping trash in the sea and literally got like trash dumps the size of islands in the middle of the ocean, basically. Like there's literally islands made of trash in the ocean right now, but we don't want to talk about that country. We want to treat that country like it's not doing anything wrong. We don't want to talk about the country, the same country that got a shit ton of trash dropped in the sea the size of islands is the same country who's literally emitting gases and shit like that into the atmosphere at a higher rate than all third world countries, all the first world countries put together. You mean to tell us that we got to change when in fact you got this country over here emitting more gas than all of the first world countries put together, emitting more pollution than the first world countries put together? Like, think about that. That same country that we love and cherish and want to try to make everybody love and cherish, despite the fact that they dump a lot of trash in the sea. You all know what country I'm talking about. Don't pretend like you don't, because the country's been in the news and it's all about praising this country and this country's great and quit blaming this country for this, that, and the other. Yeah, that's nice and all. They're still dropping trash in the sea. That's nice and all. They're still polluting at a higher rate than all the first world countries put together. And the sad part about that, it's not just them. There's other countries doing the same damn thing that's third world countries. I mean, China's not really a third world country, but it's basically at the point where like, okay, you should be past this now. You should be well past this period in your life, basically. You should be working on renewable energy or something else, basically. But it's not. And it does it, and it keeps it cheap on a regular basis. This is typically why companies go to this country and fork over their fucking their intellectual properties for cheap labor. They do it on a regular basis, and we want to blame them for taking the intellectual property when in fact these companies are willing to hand over their little intellectual property for a bottom line. This is exactly the society we live in. Everybody wants a bottom line, but everybody wants to complain about somebody taking somebody's intellectual property, but you don't point at the company for giving up their intellectual property for a bottom line. That being said, moving right along, that was a bit off tangent, but at the end of the day, this is the world that we literally live in. You can't sit up here as a woman and expect the world to revolve around you when it don't. You can't sit up here as a woman to expect because your mommy said so doesn't make it true. Because your grandmama said so doesn't make it true either. At the end of the day, it's all about how you traverse through this world. And if you're not willing to be an adult, you can't expect everybody to treat you like an adult or treat you kindly. If you're going to act like a big ass kid, people are going to treat you like a big ass kid or not take you seriously. The sad part about that is, the sad part about that is, you can't be mad for somebody treating you the way you're acting. I mean, you can, but you also got to change the fact that you're acting that way, acting that way. And the sad part about that is none of y'all are willing to act that way. I mean, none of y'all are willing to make that change and make yourself better because that requires too much work in your eyes or too much anything in your eyes, sadly. And the sad part about that, when it comes to these women that are raised by single mothers or raised by mothers that wear the pants in the family, even if there's a man in the family, the sad part about that is you literally see these women, you literally see these children in real time grow up and then act the way they do. Good example of that is the Gen Xers, Gen Xer women, and the millennial women, and the and Gen Z. Sadly, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. Well, Gen Z is a bit different. Gen Y and Gen X. Half Gen X is like fucked up, and most of Gen X is fucked up, and all of Gen Y is fucked up, basically. And the sad part about that, you literally see how these single mothers translate into the women today, literally. Because the sad part about that, I remember telling a story about a woman that I know who didn't put the father of her child on a birth certificate. And the reason why she didn't do it is so she can collect welfare. She literally frauded the system to get welfare for a child. She literally told the government she don't know who the father of the baby is. Meanwhile, she does, just so she don't have to take him to court so she can get welfare for her child. Like, think about that. That's actually a real thing in America, where women will not put the father's name on a birth certificate, also they can actually have an easy path to welfare. Like, think about that. Because going to court is just too much work, and trying to collect child support is just too much work. So we'll bypass that by not putting the dad's name on the birth certificate. And now I could just skip past the whole entire line and just get my welfare now, my cash and prizes now, basically. That's actually a real thing in the United States right now. There's a lot of children rolling around here with a blank birth certificate, basically. All because the mother conveniently forgot who the father of the baby was. Also, she can collect some welfare. So you know this shit is planned when a woman don't know the father of her baby and it's not on a birth certificate. You know the shit is planned for the fact that now she's just trying to collect on it. Sadly. Like, think about that. Oh, and thanks, Hart. And the sad part about that is, this is how the world's working right now. This is what women are seeing in the household, and this is what they're growing up doing. Like, a good example is I was talking about like the parading the men in and out your household. Yesterday when I was talking about the sons of single mothers. Basically, your son sees how the men treat his mother, therefore he grows up thinking that's how he should treat women. Same thing goes for your daughter. Your daughter sees how men treat you as you parade them out the house, talk crazy to you, talk trash on you, treat you like shit, slap you around, beat you up. They grow up thinking that's how women's supposed to be treated. But the difference between the women and the men, the boys and the girls, is that's how they should be treated, and they want to feel some entitlement in the process of doing so. And the sad part about that is they usually manifest as, I said this yesterday. This is where the whole entire thing with women come into play. Typically, what ends up happening when they grow up in a household like this, they typically believe that a man doesn't love them unless he's putting his hands on her. A man doesn't love her unless he's controlling her life and being demanding and being controlling. A man doesn't love her unless he's cussing her out, calling her out her name, and calling her bitches and sluts and shit like that. A man doesn't love her unless he's doing that. A man doesn't love her unless he's abusing her. A man doesn't love her if he's being nice to her or he's talking to her like a human being, basically. He doesn't love her. But the minute he talks to her and degrades her like an animal and treats her like she ain't shit, he obviously loves me. You see what I'm saying? Or the fact that he forces me to do stuff lets me know he loves me. And this is the logic that a lot of women carry in this day and age with this stuff. And if you ever notice, a lot of these women growing up, they typically believe that because their mom was, what they see is what they believe. Like their mom was raised, they were raised with their mom, and her mom used to pray men that used to just have sex with them and do them dirty, and that's what they believe. That's what they believe love is, and that's the type of man that they want. And because that's what their mom had, that's what I want. Because obviously he loves her because he used to slap her around, or obviously he loves her because he used to cheat on her, and that's what it is now. So basically, if you cheat on this is typically why women stay in relationships with cheating men, because they grow up seeing their mom being cheated on, so they think it's right for their mom to want to keep on hanging on to a man that's cheating on them. So now they believe that this is how women should be treated. This is how women. This is how a man should be. He should cheat on his significant other, and and she should just stand by his side 100%. Sad part about that is when a woman cheats on a man, he's not taking her back. There's a high chance he's not taking her back. But the sad part about that, on the flip side, when a man cheats on a woman, there's a higher chance that she's taking him back. Sadly, I think it's what, like 60 to 80% chance of a woman staying with a man that cheated on her. It's what, like a 5 to 15% chance that a man stays with a woman that cheated on him. You see how that works? Um, and the sad part about that is this is literally the society that we're growing up in. People want to act like it's not their fault when in fact they caused their own trauma. Nobody wants to take responsibility for their own actions. And the sad part about that, girls grew up in households where they watched their mom not taking responsibility for their own actions, and they down the men who they parade in and out their house and say men are dogs, men are this. But the sad part about that is you let them in the house, you let them have sex with you, and you let them do any fucking thing or say anything they want to you, and now you want to call them dogs. So that makes you a dog just as much as they're a dog at the end of the day, sadly. Because the sad part about that is you can't sit up here and say that all men are dogs when you let them treat you like a dog. Nobody can do to you what you don't let them do to you at the end of the day. If you let them abuse you, you let them treat you like shit, you let them treat you like garbage, that's how you're going to be treated. So you can't expect any other man to treat you like a princess or a queen when all your life you've been treated like garbage. And you've dated garbage men. So you can't expect me to want to treat you like a queen when in fact you're the one that got yourself into the very messes that you got yourself into. Because like I said yesterday in the last stream, serious of bad decisions at the end of the day. You made a series of bad decisions to get you into the mess that you're in. And the sad part about that is you don't want to take responsibility for it, so you blame men or you blame the men you dated, which is sad because you can't take responsibility for your own actions. Sad part about that is I realize in the Western world, women really never had to take responsibility for their actions, even growing up. Even in the 1950s and 40s, we would always talk about how good it was in the 1950s and 40s. Women never had to take responsibility for their own actions. I actually made a comment about this one time where I said, if a woman is at a store, if a woman's at a store in the 1940s and 50s and she breaks something, the husband has to pay for it. She doesn't have to pay for it. It falls on the husband to actually pay for the stuff that his wife broke. You see what I'm saying? So the husband used to have to pay for something that his wife messed up at the store. So women never really took responsibility for any of their actions. Another good example of that is, I hate to touch on this because it kind of sort of plays into all their race thing. Back in the day when there were slaves, white man bangs black woman, perfectly fine, normal, everyday thing. A white woman get caught banging a black guy, he raped me. Like, and the sad part about that is the thing that bothers me the most about that is most of the time when those white men walked in the room, they literally seen her on top riding him like a pogo stick, but he raped her. The sad part about that is white women never had to take responsibility for their actions at all, growing up at all. So now they feel entitled enough to say all this stuff and spout all this craziness and this SJW bullcrap because nobody's checked them ever. Nobody's ever checked them. Even back in the 1950s, nobody's checked them. Like, I'm sorry, you're not really checking a woman if she could break something at a store and you got to pay for it. Or you're not really checking a woman if you're raising a milkman, the paper man, or the bread man or the refrigerator man's child, basically. You're not really checking women if that's the case. The sad part about that is there's a lot of men, baby boomers and before, that are raising somebody else's child that they thought was their child their whole entire damn life. Then they have this DNA test and they found out it's not even their fucking child. There's a lot of them in Great Britain. There's a lot of them in the United States. There's a lot of them everywhere. I think Great Britain has the highest percentage with like 45%, 40 to 45% of men are raising somebody else's child. Of baby boomers and older are raising somebody else's child. Like, think about that. You're raising somebody else's child. Really, really think about that. You're literally raising somebody else's child right now. How would you feel as a man raising somebody else's child? You can't honestly sit up here and tell me that you would still feel some type of way, or you would still feel the same way about a child that you're raising that don't belong to you. Like, think about that for a second. Sorry about that. Fell out. You can't sit up here and be happy about raising a child that that's not yours. And you find out it's not yours. You don't put all the financial stuff into this child growing up. Raise them like your own, and you find out later on in life that it's not your child. You can't sit up here and tell me that women were ever in check if that's the case. Another good example of that they talk about women in the good old days is way back when America was being started. Currently, white women used to run off to the Native American villages because they had rights over there apparently to vote in who's going to be in power and stuff like that because women had rights over there. So a lot of the white women used to literally run off to the Native American tribes so they can feel like they have some entitlement or some power that they never had before, that they thought they never had before in the white community. Sad part about this, they've always had the power, but the power's always been different. They have the power to not take responsibility for any damn thing. They've always had the power to basically place blame elsewhere, or be able to be treated like somebody that's not candy capable of dealing with things. And the sad part about that now, with all this feminist stuff, they want to be strong and independent, but they don't want to take any responsibility for their actions. Or they want to be strong and independent, but they don't want to join the service because that's just wrong, and that's discriminatory against women. Oh, but it's perfectly fine that men do it, and it's discriminatory against men, but you don't want to do it. It's discriminatory against women now. Stuff like that. They always like cite stuff where, well, a woman's role is to be at home. You can't even cook. How's your role to be at home when you can't even cook? And this is the sad part, and it makes me sick when I hear this stuff like that. When I hear women say this stuff like that, or a minute ago you were an independent woman, and all of a sudden now that selective draft comes up, now all of a sudden now women should be in the kitchen or women should be at home now. Like, really? So you'll ride with your morals as long as it benefits you. The minute it starts getting hard, or looks like it's going to get hard, and all of a sudden now you'll drop your ideology and morals, your morality and ideology for traditionalism and stuff like that. Another good example of that is women always talk about how they're independent women and they would pay for their dates and this, that, and the other. Go ahead, take a woman out on a date and make her pay for her half. See if you get another date with that woman. This is the hypocrisy of the modern day women. This is the hypocrisy of women raised by single mothers. They want traditionalism. They don't want traditionalism, but they want all the perks of traditionalism. See what I'm saying? So they want a man to pay for them, even though they make their own money. They want a man to make more money than them, and they want to be taken care of, but they're independent women. Told y'all stop listening to that Beyonce shit. See, Beyonce ran out to get a man to make more than her. It means you go sit down in the corner and act like you got some sense and pay attention to stuff like that. No matter how, like, the sad part is about that, Beyonce might talk about how independent she is, but at the end of the day, she's not independent because she's with a man.
and she has a husband. She has a whole ass family and a whole ass husband. Sad part about that, they've been together for like forever. The only reason why they're probably still together is if Beyonce gets a divorce from Jay-Z, depending on where they're at in their career, she might have to pay his ass. Or she might not get shit from it because they both make about the same. You see what I'm saying? So she finna get nothing from Jay-Z. This is why she's still married to Jay-Z. Jay-Z can do any damn thing he wants and get away with it because he knows damn well when a divorce happens, because they're both rich, they're both entertainers, he probably ain't gonna have to fork over no matter much money. And if she happens to make more money that year when she decides to get a divorce, she got to pay Jay-Z. Like, think about that for a second. Think about that for a second. And you wonder why she's still together with the man. Come on now. She ain't stupid. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of dumb women that get a divorce, like, Adele, or, Jeannie Mai, or any women like that where they make more than their husbands, and now they got to fork over money to their husbands. And it's like, now they want to be upset about it. Like, think about that. This is the problem with women that are raised by, this is the problem with daughters that are raised by single mothers. They want all this entitlement, they want all this stuff, but they don't want none of the consequences that come with it. They want all this craziness, but they don't want to take responsibility. They take the responsibility of the stuff, the fallout that goes with the stuff that they want. They're always on the fence about this stuff. I mean, they're not even on the fence about this stuff. They're very open and blatant about it. Like, well, I don't think I should have to do that. Well, it's called responsibility. You have to do it. Well, no, you're discriminating against women. And that's basically what they say. You're being discriminatory against women. And that's exactly what they'll shout at the top of their lungs. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, it's like, no, that's how life is. If you want to act like a man and be treated like a man, you got to take the consequences that a man would normally take in a workplace. It's not discrimination. It is what it is. It's the real world, lady. And the sad part about that is women don't want the real world. They want to fake like they want the real world, and they want all the benefits that go with the real world. They don't want to deal with any of the fallout. They don't want to deal with any of the responsibility. They don't want to deal with any of the negativities that come with wanting to be. They don't want to deal with none of that from being strong and independent. They just want to act like they're strong and independent. They really don't want to be strong and independent. They want to act like they're strong and independent. Because at the end of the day, the minute something happens, the first thing that they say is it's the man's fault, or it's men's fault that this is not going the way that we like it to go, or it's a man's fault the way this is a good example of that is movies. Because you told men that this movie's for women and it's going to have this narrative. It's all about promoting strong women. Now they don't go see the movie. Now it's man's fault that the movie didn't do good at the box office. Like, think about that. It's man's fault that your movie didn't do at the box office, despite the fact that you were downing, disrespecting, and bitch slapping the fuck out of men the whole entire time. It's man's fault that your movie flopped. Now, if you were more inviting and more welcoming and had a little bit better writers on the team, your movie probably would have did well. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have the writers. You didn't do the proper press junkets like you should. Instead of talk about the movie, you want to diss men in the process of doing so. Like, and you wonder why your movies are flopping. Like back in the day, my grandma and everybody's grandma, and I'm pretty sure granddads used to say back in the day, you get more bees with honey. The sad part about that, this society have no honey. They don't know how to produce honey, and they don't know what it means to have honey, so you can get more bees to come to see your stuff. The sad part about that is it all comes down to marketing. If you're going to disrespect your market's not going to show up. You have nobody to blame but yourself. At the end of the day, women, you have nobody to blame but yourself at the end of the day. If you're going to disrespect all the people who spend the money to come see the stuff that you're trying to promote, you can't blame nobody but yourself if you're going to disrespect them. I mean, I know you're used to disrespecting your boyfriends or your husbands or men in your family and them still riding with you, but that's not how overall society works. If you disrespect enough people, they typically won't spend money at your establishment. That'd be no different if I walked in a bakery and the lady called me the N-word. No matter how good the bakery is, well, I might go back, but typically black people aren't going to go back to a bakery that's racist, and the word's going to be spread. And typically, the bakery's probably going to shut down for the fact that it's not financially savvy anymore because because you lost a large chunk of your buyer base, basically. Sad part about that is that's actually happened in real life multiple times. With with a bakery being against gays and a bakery being against black people. Matter of fact, I can think of a bakery right now who literally had to close its doors because the one lady called called a customer a nigger, basically, and she was known for saying the N word, and it got around the neighborhood around them, and everybody stopped going to the bakery. Even the racist people stopped going to the bakery. Like the racist white people, they go, "Yeah, bitch went a little too far. I'm not going to the bakery no more," and they all went to a different bakery. And the sad part about that bakery had to close its doors. Like that, you fucked up when a racist white people stop going to your bakery. Like, let that shit sink in. When racist white people stop going to your bakery, you fucked up as a human being. And that's typically a problem. And the sad part about that, they blame the black people for not coming to the bakery when in fact most of their demographic is white. They blame the black people for the reasoning why their bakeries closed when in fact most of their demographic is white. And the sad part about that is they found there was a white lady in the bakery when the lady called the one person an N-word, and she basically spread the news too. It's like she was like the neighborhood Yelp lady, and apparently got around the neighborhood real quick. But that's neither here nor there. But the sad part about that, that's literally the society that we're living in right now with a bunch of women who don't want to take responsibility for anything that comes out of their mouth or anything they say or anything they do, and they want to shame everybody for not riding with them when in fact they disrespected the shit out of everybody. Like, how do you do that? That'd be like me bitch slapping the King of Lions and expect them to come still see my shit. Still be sub to my shit tomorrow. That'd be like me disrespecting Heartbroken Kid and expecting them to still be sub to me. That'd be like me disrespecting Yam and expecting them to still show up on Bleeding Edge Red Pill and trolling trolls. Like, it doesn't work like that. I know if I disrespect people, I know that there's consequences to my actions. Therefore, I have to accept those consequences to my actions. Am I ready to actually put forth the effort to have to accept consequences for those actions? If the answer is no, then therefore I'm not going to do it at the end of the day. It is what it is. Like, I'm not going to sit up here and disrespect somebody if they don't really deserve to be disrespected. And I know that there's a level of me being responsible for my own actions. I know if there's a level of me being at fault, I'm not going to sit up here and blame everybody else for my faults, basically. Especially if I'm like anywhere between like 60 to 100% wrong. I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's their fault. And this is typically what today's society does when it comes to women. And the sad part about that is women are entitled off the bat any damn way. They got this entitlement complex already. What I really noticed is women that are raised by single mothers are ultra entitled. They feel ultra special, ultra entitled to do the stupid shit that they do. The sad part about that is now we're dealing with all these women plus the women raised by single mothers on top of that. So we got people who are super ultra entitled, and we got people that have already been entitled from day one because they're women. You got the people in the middle that are more entitled than those women. You got the women raised by single mothers, or raised by women, even if they had a father in the house, raised by women who wore the pants in the family. They're ultra entitled to all this stuff in the world, despite the fact that they earn nothing in the world. They seem to be ultra entitled, and it's sad. It's really sad. And you watch as the world burn around you, and you laugh about it, and they want to say you're wrong for watching the world burn. You should help the world. No, I shouldn't help the world at all. I should let it burn. Maybe we can restart all over from the ashes when you realize we ain't got shit. And the sad part about that, in the famous words of RPM, like he always says, when the power goes out, feminism will go out with it. And it's true. Because the sad part about that, you can look at it like this in third world countries. One of the many reasons why feminism hasn't really taken hold of a third world country, is because there's way too many problems and issues being thrown at people in a third world country for it to take hold as it does in a first world country. And the reasoning being is It's very hard to be a feminist when you're starving. It's very hard to be a feminist when you don't know where your next meal is, if you don't know where if your child's going to eat, or if you're laid off from a job and there's no welfare program for you to rely on. It's very hard to be a feminist when you got to worry about all this shit. You got all this shit on your plate, and none of it good. You got to worry about if you can eat, if you can feed your family, the crime rate, various gangs that just run roughshod through your neighborhoods, various cartels and mafias and syndicates and shit like that. You got to worry about that too. You got to worry about, if your children are making home safe, the safety of your children, the safety of your home, the safety of your neighborhood, the safety of all this stuff, and you got clean running water. If not, how can you make the water clean? So you're too busy to be worried about simple problems like, feminism or, being treated equally. Because you're too busy trying to live and stay alive to have to worry about shit like this. The sad part about that is this is the reason why SJW and feminism is a first world country problem, because they have all the free time in the world. And the sad part about it, I've talked about this multiple times when it comes to women. The very women who will sit up here and say that Black Lives Matter would never date a black man and talk about how oppressed their life is, or literally sitting in a pool with a white man financing her life. Like, think about that. Like, good example of that is Ocasio-Cortez chick. She literally said, and I quote, that white men need to be re-educated, as she's sitting in a hot tub next to a white man who's financing her life. Like, think about that. Really think about that. Same thing goes for the rest of these feminists. Like that Muslim chick that was on the TV, how many men do we have to kill so they can stop raping? She's married to a white man who finances her life to fly around and talk shit on white men. Like, think about that for a second. She's literally married to a white man that's well-to-do, who lets her fly around the world and talk shit on white men. Because the sad part about that, most of these SJWs that will sit up here and talk about black rights, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to date a black guy. 9 times out of 10, they'll never date a black guy. They just like to focus on things so they don't have to focus on themselves. It's basically what Jordan Peterson said about, climate control and, how can we worry about cleaning our room when we got climate control to have to worry about? The sad part about that is if you don't clean your room, you can't expect to go out and change any damn thing if you're not willing to change yourself first. At the end of the day, if you're not willing to put in the effort to fix yourself, you can't go out in the world and fix the world if you're not willing to fix yourself. At the end of the day, because you have to be able to do it on a micro level to do it on a macro level. Oh, yeah. So you can't sit up here, be trying to change things on a major scale if you're not willing to do it in your private life. Because now you're a hypocrite and people see it. And now when you get called out, you're going to try to blame everybody for calling you out, basically, when in fact, you're a hypocrite at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like that one quote that I forget who said it. Be the change that you want to see. If you can't be the change that you want to see, then there's no point of you even trying to change things or do anything good for the world if you're not willing to actually do it yourself. You see what I'm saying? Or do it for yourself. Because people will take that and be like, well, yeah, I'm trying to change the world here. And the fact of the matter is, you're not trying to change yourself. The point is to be a leader, not a follower. Or the point is to, practice what you preach, in other words. So if you're not doing it to yourself or private life, you can't sit up here and try to preach to people about how to fix things when you're not willing to fix your own life. It's kind of like my beef with people who try to give relationship advice that's not in a relationship. If you're not in a relationship, shut the fuck up about relationship advice. If you're not in a successful relationship, shut the fuck up. And what I mean by successful relationship, because this one woman tried to get me to one time. I goes, are you in a relationship? I go, how long have you been in a relationship? Oh, I've been in a relationship for like 20 years. I go, a successful relationship? Well, yeah, 20 years, which is kind of successful. Or are you still in a relationship? No. Okay, it's not a successful relationship. Now, was that 20 years consecutively, or was it broken up got back together again and broke up and got back together again. And she actually admitted to actually breaking up and getting back together again for 15 fucking years, 20 years, basically. And the sad part about that, apparently, they took a break multiple times in between, so it ended up only being like 15 years that they were together after breaking up and getting back together again. And you want to sit up here and give relationship advice, and you can't even get a successful relationship yourself. You've been in the same fucked up relationship for 20 years, and you want to give relationship advice. Like, I'm going to need you to sit down. I'm going to need to go talk to somebody over here who's been in a relationship longer than me, or who's been in a successful relationship that made it work and they didn't break up and get back together, because that's not how relationships work. You don't break up, get back together, break up, get back together, break up. That's not how any of this shit works. A relationship is meant to be maintained. If you can't maintain a relationship, then what's the point of being in one? If you got to take a break from a relationship, you shouldn't be in a relationship. That's the problem that I have with a lot of the modern women nowadays. They want to say all this craziness and do all this crazy shit, or try to, say, oh, we're going to take a break. And the sad part about that is what I've noticed is with these breaks is usually they're leaving you for another man. And if it doesn't pan out, then they want you back, basically. Like, there's many stories about women, who wanted to have a polyamorous relationship with their husband, but their husband said no, so they broke up with them. Then they went to go have sex with the man that they really want to have sex with. Then the sex ended up being trash. Now they want their husband back. Like, they had this fantasy worked up in their mind that this guy's going to be the greatest man in the world, and the sex ended up being trash. So now they want their husbands back. Or the women who their husband says yes to a polyamorous relationship, and they get it, and the man that they have sex with suck worse than their man in bed. So now they don't want to have a polyamorous relationship no more because their husband's just getting pussy all over the damn place. Now they want a polyamorous relationship no more because now they're jealous, because now their sex life is not as good as their husband's sex life. Like, think about that. Shit like this actually happens. People don't think things through, and they think because they're a woman, they're going to be able to always get whatever they want whenever they want, when in fact they forget that they're picky as hell. So all these men that line up at their door, they're not going to get a chance with them at the end of the day. Like, all these men that line up at their door because they say oh, you're beautiful, you're this, that, and the other. Them women don't want them men. Just because you got those men lined up at the door, you forget the fact that you're never going to sleep with those men. And the men that you really want either are going to pump and dump you, or not going to want to put you in an actual relationship. And this is typically how this shit works. Like, it's sad, but it's so true. I've seen polyamorous relationships where the husband has better sex with his partner than he does with his wife. So now he's debating if he should leave his wife for his partner now in a polyamorous relationship. Or he doesn't want to have sex with his wife anymore because his polyamorous partner is better in bed than his wife. So now he doesn't want to have sex with his wife anymore, and the sex between his wife and him goes down, and she's feeling some type of way. Jealousy much. You see how this works? Because the sad part about that is there's always going to be a jealous person in a polyamorous relationship. And the sad part about that is if the man is doing better than a woman in a polyamorous relationship, she's going to be jealous of that man no matter what. Because when women think polyamorous relationship, they think that because he's a man, he's not going to be able to get any women. Because they're a woman, their options are limited. Their options are unlimited, basically. And typically what I've noticed, a lot of these polyamorous relationships, sadly, if it's not inside the Mormon community, a lot of these women that push for polyamorous relationships were raised by single mothers. Statistically, raised by single mothers. Or statistically raised in a household where the mom wore the pants. Either way, you're basically raised by a single mother if your dad didn't really get to speak up and he was neutered anyway. So you're basically raised by a single mother. And it's one of those things where it's like you have to understand what you're getting yourself into to know. You have to understand why things are the way they are. And the sad part about that is something else I wanted to say about this whole entire thing with women entitlement and cucks and simps is at the end of the day, you have to realize that anytime a man hits on you, or anytime a man does something nice for you, he's basically, like in the famous words of Chris Rock, he's basically just offering dick, basically, at the end of the day. At the end of the day, he just wants you to dick you down and bounce, basically. Only people that really want you in a whole ass relationship are those Simpson cubs. Those are the only people that want you in a whole ass relationship. Sad part about that is you're not willing to give them the time of day. People like me, I'm just offering dick and I'm bouncing. You're not worth my time. You're not worth anything to me as far as anything past, anything relationship wise. That's not even my vocabulary when it comes to people like you, women like you. I'm just here to get some dick, to give you some dick, offer you some dick, stick it in you and bounce, basically. That's it. And yeah, you call me a dick, but you just got stuck by my dick at the end of the day. And that's pretty much how I feel about it. Because at the end of the day, there are women that are relationship material, and there are a lot of women that aren't relationship material. There are a lot of women that get in relationships that they don't even need to be in. They want to blame the guy. Like, no, you got into that relationship. You chose to be in that relationship. You had sex with them. Therefore, you chose to be in that relationship. Because at the end of the day, women are the gatekeepers of sex. And if sex not being offered, then you shouldn't have to worry about a bad relationship. And men are the gatekeepers of relationships. Because they basically are the deciding factor if they're going to be in a relationship or not, for all intents and purposes. Or if they're going to lock it down. The sad part about that, there are a lot of men who get suckered or punked into relationships that don't really want to be in a relationship with that person because they get tricked in it, like I said, by these single mothers having babies thinking they could trap these men. Or a lot of them just bounce anyway, with or without, even if she has a baby or not, basically. A lot of them just bounce. Because the sad part about that, a lot of these women, daughters that are raised by single mothers, they believe that if they have that person's baby, that person's going to stay. That Disneyland princess shit mentality going on in their brain, basically. If they have this baby, that man will stay. And that's their exact thought process. It's sad, but it's true. And nobody should live like that, but that's how they live. Because at the end of the day, women don't think long term, they think short term. Or they think they think long term, but it's a short term game for a long term fail. You see what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, instant gratification is all that matters to women. Long term gratification, not so much. Instant gratification, yeah. Because the sad part about that, I can tell you about a lot of women right now who are homeowners who didn't fully think shit through. I know a lot of women who are homeowners right now because they want instant gratification and the ability to gloat about owning a home to the point where they bought one and now they got to fix it up or now they got to do all this extra work on it. And the sad part about that is none of the work is done and they're complaining about their house needing all these repairs. And none of the work is being done. Like, think about that. Think about that. None of the work is being done, but they have a house and they want to complain about their house being in disarray or having holes in certain places or, not having everything in their house that they want. But they could gloat about having a house, but if you go to their house, it's like, okay, something I would never live in. Or something fucked up by third world country standards, and I would never live in this house, basically. And it's one of those things where it's like, you have to look at it like that. They want an instant gratification. They got a house, unfinished, or needs a shit ton of work, but they got it. Like, think about that. They got a house. Now they got to put in the work, and they're not putting in the work. Or they got a house, and it needs a shit ton of work done, but they live there, and it has various things living in it that should be outside living in it, basically, because that's your life now. Let it be groundhogs, let it be moles, let it be rodents, let it be, squirrels or any animal that should probably be outside your house, all living in crevices of your house, basically, or crawl spaces in your house. All because you wanted instant gratification and you didn't fully think it through. Nor did you think about the time that you're not going to have to replace anything or fix anything. Nor did you think about the skills that you lacked to actually do any of this shit in the first damn place, or the fact that you lack an actual man in your life to actually do any of this work, which is sad for the fact that a lot of men actually don't do this work at all anymore, and they basically hire people because they were raised by sissies. They're all sissies now, basically. They can't do shit like this anymore, and they don't really teach classes like this anymore. Sadly. It's sad, but it's true. And the sad part about that is you run into all these problems with all these people, and they still want to project this good life, or they're having a good life, when in fact they're having a miserable life. Their life is so miserable, it's sad. But they want to project that they're having this great life at the end of the day. when in fact they're having a horrible life and are having a horrible time at it, sadly. And the sad part about that, nobody ever wants to admit when they're wrong. Nobody ever wants to admit when they're wrong. Nobody ever wants to admit that they bit off more than they could chew. They basically fake it till they make it. And the sad part about that, not all of them make it. Or all of them struggle to make it. But not all of them make it. A lot of them hobble on and pretend like everything's great when in fact everything is not great. The sad part about that, a lot of the women can't even fix their own house. They're literally waiting for that person to come by to help them out to fix their house. It comes down to that one mentality, like, it comes down to that mentality that women think men think the same way they do. And the sad part about that, men don't. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some sissy men who do, but typically most masculine men don't think the same way that women do when it comes to actually getting a relationship. A man's not looking for a man. A man's not looking for a woman with a house that makes a shit ton of money and drives a nice car. He's looking for a woman that is fertile, who could have children, who could take care of him, who would actually, not take care of him, looking for a woman that's fertile, who can actually have children, who actually have his back 100% and be faithful. Pretty much all he's really looking for. Women are looking for stability, handsome, paycheck, house, cars, watches, vacations and shit like that. Whereas men are looking for something simple, like fertility, having my back, and being reliable, dependable, and trustworthy, and faithful. That's all a man's really looking for. Sad part about that is women complain about men not doing this when in fact they're doing the very same thing that a lot of these men are doing. Hell, I've actually met women who complain about their husbands cheating, but they cheated first on their husbands, and now they're complaining about their husbands cheating. But because he doesn't know, it doesn't technically count. You see what I'm saying? That's basically women's thought. He doesn't know, so it doesn't count. Like, yeah, it does count. It still counts. Like, you can't sit up here and pretend like you didn't cheat and be mad at your husband for cheating when in fact you did it longer and first. Because the sad part about that, 9 times out of 10, if a man's cheating, either he's been cheating since day one, or he's cheating because he knows you're cheating, or he's cheating because he's not getting anything at home. But at the end of the day, it's his fault why he's cheating. So in a society, you always blame the man for cheating. Even if it's her fault, it's his fault. If it's his fault, it's his fault, basically. So it's one of those things where even if he's not getting any sex, it's still his fault if he goes out and cheats. The sad part about that, I've literally heard women literally say that sex isn't the most important thing in a relationship. Now, don't get me wrong. Sex is very important. Sex is very important at the end of the day. Because sex actually keeps you bonding as two human beings, sadly. So sex is very important. It's basically like the most intimate touch you could possibly pull off, basically. So it's all about bonding. And if you're not having sex, and the same women that will say sex isn't important in a relationship are the same women that are literally stepping out on their husbands or boyfriends. Literally stepping out on their husbands or boyfriends. So if you're a woman ever say sex isn't the most important thing in a relationship, or sex isn't that important in a relationship, they're stepping out on their boyfriends or significant others. It is what it is. Yeah, it's not important in your relationship, but it's important for your side piece or your side nigga, basically. Sex is very important when you're stepping out on your husband. It's not important in your relationship because you don't want to give it to him, you want to give it to somebody else. That's why it's not important in your relationship, because you want to give it to somebody else. That's typically how it works. And that's basically women's thought process. It's things like this that makes it funny. But yeah, I rambled on long enough. Y'all have a blessed day. Be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk do not spoil yourselves. And always be willing to learn and better yourself, no matter who you are. Man, woman, child, lesbian, gay, straight, Apache helicopter, I don't really care, transgender. Always be willing to better yourself as a human being and do better for yourself. And always be willing to stand by yourself and to stand by your decisions when you make them. And take responsibility for your own take responsibility for your actions in every damn thing, sadly. Because we live in a society where nobody wants to take responsibility for their actions. And now men don't want to take responsibility for their actions. So now we're going to live in a society full of people who don't want to take responsibility for their actions and blame everybody else around them. So try to take responsibility for your actions. Start small and go big, basically. But yeah, y'all have a blessed day. Be good. Happy to serve the Manosphere. Y'all have a good one. I'm out.
A nigga might be from a third world country, but a nigga got standards.
Me llegan a casa, no se capea. Solo modelos como Barea.